Time is short for undecided voters to choose their candidate, with the next presidential election just weeks away. The following presents our best case for rejecting Donald Trump's bid to regain the presidency. There are many reasons to oppose Trump. Here we focus on the most disqualifying. In the aftermath of his loss in 2020, Trump's misbehavior and an advocacy by many of his campaign lawyers, which stretched the bounds of both truth and law, threw the country into crisis. We hope this effort to untangle those historic events helps voters distill fact from fiction. What we know comes almost entirely from the testimony of Trump's Republican lawyers and inner circle, given under oath, before various courts of law and the U.S. Congress. We summarize these facts and give our opinion here. During his 2016 run for office, Trump began planting seeds of doubt about the integrity of our elections. Though he won that race, he often spoke about voter fraud. It became a frequent talking point and then an ongoing Trump theme. During his run for re-election, voter fraud and Democrats stealing, the election became a constant drumbeat, talked about more than any other issue except immigration. When Trump claimed victory before going to sleep on election night, with millions of legal ballots still to be counted, it foreshadowed the increasingly desperate behavior to come. In the months following his loss in 2020, Trump's claims of irregularities and widespread voter fraud were put on steroids and directly blamed for his defeat. He talked about it constantly, made it a cornerstone of his fundraising efforts, and the phrase, "Stop the steal," became a mantra for his supporters. While Trump, his aides, and lawyers were incessantly ranting about election fraud and theft, his own staff was telling him a different story. His campaign manager, Bill Stepien, campaign data expert Matt Oczkowski, close advisor Kellyanne Conway, and even his own Vice President Mike Pence, among many others, told him there was no election fraud that could have affected the outcome. Despite this, Trump refused to accept his loss, instead hiring a well-respected data analytics firm, Berkeley Research, to investigate his claims. When Berkeley found nothing, Trump tried again with Simpatico software. With their analysis completed, CEO Ken Block stated, no substantive election fraud was uncovered, and every fraud claim we looked at proved to be false. Trump tried to bury these findings, hoping the public would never hear about the research he paid for, but as you shall see, keeping secrets, especially big ones, isn't easy. In the aftermath of Trump's loss, his Attorney General, William Barr, had the Department of Justice do their own investigation into the election. When the DOJ also found no evidence of a problem, Barr told the president nothing that could change the election result was found. When Trump persisted with his false claims, Barr resigned in protest at the end of 2020. Trump then pressured Jeff Rosen, the new acting Attorney General, and his deputy, Richard Donahue, to just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and my Republican congressman. For days before the electoral certification on January 6th of 2021, Trump made his infamous phone call to Brad Raffensperger, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State. Most have heard the call where Trump pressured Georgia officials, saying, "What I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state." Brian Kemp, Georgia's Republican governor, told Trump they were confident, after numerous recounts, their data was correct and there was nothing more to be done. While under oath, Cassidy Hutchinson, a key aide to Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, told Congress she had heard Trump himself admit he had lost the 2020 election. On December 11th, after his final legal effort had been rejected by the Supreme Court, Trump said, "Mark, this is embarrassing. Figure it out. We need to figure it out. I don't want people to know we lost," Hutchinson recalled. These facts make clear that informed Republicans, top advisors, state officials, and even independent data investigators Trump himself had hired all told him fraud was not the reason he lost the 2020 election. Trump ignored them and refused to concede, instead launching a dark, unprecedented, and potentially illegal effort to remain in office. We all should remember the events of January 6th, 2021, and the storming of the Capitol building by Trump supporters. On that Wednesday morning, before the violence began, a number of speakers, including Trump lawyers Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman, then ending with the president himself, spoke from the ellipse near the White House. The net effect was to incite his gathered supporters, including right-wing militias such as the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, to march to the Capitol to prevent, or at least delay, the certification of the Electoral College vote count. But why? What purpose would be served by a chaotic, deadly insurrection that delayed Congress from their rightful duty to certify? Up to this point, the Trump campaign had been talking election fraud and theft nonstop, filing lawsuits in all the key swing states and at the federal level, 63 of them in all. They had zero success, failing in every single case, including many heard by judges Trump himself had appointed. Things seemed hopeless, but Trump and his most ardent supporters had been working on a secret scheme ever since their election loss. They hoped to throw the electoral count back to states or bring the election itself to the House of Representatives. This would depend on delay and a cloud of confusion, per Ken Skesbro, the Trump lawyer who hatched the idea. The easiest path to igniting the constitutional crisis Trump needed was to bully his own vice president into refusing to certify the electoral count. This would prevent Joe Biden from reaching the necessary 270 electoral votes to become president. In the Trump plan, the electoral slates would be sent back to the state legislatures or the election would be thrown to the House. This would be extraordinary, as nothing like it had ever happened in a presidential election. Mike Pence knew his certification of the electoral count as president of the Senate was entirely ceremonial, but could he withstand the enormous pressure being put on him by Trump and his allies? Fast forward to August of 2023, just after Trump's D.C. indictment for election interference. Pence said, "President Trump demanded that I use my authority as vice president, presiding over the count of the Electoral College, to essentially overturn the election by returning or literally rejecting votes. I had no authority to do that." Since the vice president was critical to their plan, Trump and his allies, even some at the state level, hounded him relentlessly. As the insurrection wore on, it seemed Trump's efforts had failed and Pence was determined to fulfill his constitutional duty of certifying the vote. As Trump's supporters battled police, broke through windows, and desecrated the halls of the Capitol, they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence," over and over. Since they had brought a gallows with them, it seemed a credible threat. Sitting in his private White House dining room, Trump watched the violence unfold on TV, but waited hours before making a public statement calling on the rioters to leave. He only tore himself away from the turmoil briefly to pour gasoline on the fire, tweeting, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution." It was one of the most Orwellian moments of his presidency, and payback for Pence refusing to bend the knee. Trump has said he's been treated more unfairly than any politician in history. A far stronger case can be made that no vice president has ever been so badly abused by their president as Mike Pence. You might ask, why this bedlam to throw the election to the House of Representatives when Democrats held the majority? Yes, Democrats did hold a slim majority, but any presidential election the House might decide would be by the votes of the 50 states, not by the members at large. Trump's lawyers knew that the GOP held 26 state delegations to Democrats' 23, with a tie in Pennsylvania, meaning Trump would prevail, barring something completely unexpected. Thankfully, no president has ever been chosen in this manner, but it's why getting the election to the House, by any means necessary, was the Trump plan. So now we come to the heart of the story. To his everlasting credit, Mike Pence stood firm. Congress certified the electoral count at about 3 a.m. on January 7th, and Joe Biden officially became the 46th president of the United States. But what about the scheme? You know, the wide-ranging conspiracy that had been percolating behind the scenes ever since the election. Trump's creative lawyers had conjured up a plan to create fraudulent slates of electors in all the key swing states, and Trump had signed on. Most important were Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Georgia, and Wisconsin. Ken Skesbro concocted the idea days after Trump's election loss, then contacted Jim Truppies, a fellow Republican lawyer and Wisconsin ally. In an early email to Truppies introducing the scheme, Skesbro wrote about the impact fake electors might have. At a minimum, with such a cloud of confusion, no votes from WI and perhaps also MINPA should be counted, perhaps enough to throw the election to the House. Truppies then shared the idea with the decision makers at the Trump campaign. The hope was the fake electors could be used to compete with or replace the actual electors pledged to Biden. If Mike Pence had cooperated, the rioters had succeeded, or, per Skesbro, a big enough cloud of confusion had been created, these slates of phony electors would have been put forward. Trump hoped the resulting chaos and delay would send the election to the House, where the fabricated controversy would be settled in his favor. As the lawyers who cooked it up should have known, this plot put them all in legal jeopardy. This is supported by the veil of silence and secrecy the conspiracy maintained during the post-election period and the many indictments handed down against them since. Skesbro, the originator, has been indicted in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. He has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in those states and others, requiring his admission of guilt. Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell, both Trump lawyers, have also been indicted, Ellis in both Arizona and Georgia, Powell in Georgia. Powell entered a guilty plea and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, while Ellis did the same in both of her cases. Also indicted in Georgia for election interference are Trump himself, his chief of staff Mark Meadows, lawyers Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman, campaign aide Mike Roman, and a number of others. In Arizona, Eastman, Giuliani, Meadows, and Roman were indicted again, as was lawyer Christina Bobb. Ironically, Trump then made her head of election integrity for the Republican Party. Trump attorney Boris Epshteyn. And Kelly Ward, head of the Arizona Republican Party, also faced charges in the state, while Trump is an unindicted co-conspirator. Michigan and Nevada also have fake elector cases. There are also 2 federal cases still to be heard: the stolen classified documents case against Trump in Florida, which awaits a ruling from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals before moving forward, and the election interference case in Washington. The judge in the D.C. case just released a 165-page brief presented by DOJ Special Counsel Jack Smith, which lays out the government's evidence. Every voter should become familiar with this document before casting their ballot. Trump is presently the lone defendant in D.C., but Skesbro, Eastman, Giuliani, and Powell are all unindicted co-conspirators and may also face federal charges soon. What does it mean when so many lawyers for Donald Trump have been indicted and admitted guilt while in his service? Are we to believe they're all just incredibly altruistic? That they acted independently for Trump's benefit but without his knowledge? That conclusion isn't credible given the sheer number of indictments, guilty pleas, disciplinary actions, bar suspensions, disbarments, defamation suits, large defamation awards, and bankruptcies this group has accrued. It's very hard to see them as honorable, but far easier to believe they used their work for Trump as a springboard to fame and fortune. Of course, that would mean doing anything and everything the boss might demand, perhaps to the point of criminality. Their conspiracy involved just over 100 people, including the fake electors, but they were found out as investigations began and people talked. Yet these same lawyers, along with Trump, would have you believe a far wider conspiracy took place, involving elections in all 7 swing states. This would have involved thousands of people, yet was allegedly pulled off without a trace of evidence, a single indictment, or one solitary voice speaking up to expose the truth. At the same time, these Republican lawyers, along with Trump and his supporters, had no problem at all with the many local, state, and federal races decided in their favor, putting party allies into office in all the swing states, using the very same ballots they had repeatedly told us were fraudulent. These are serious contradictions and strongly support our view that Trump's fraud claims were simply election propaganda and, as with much of his campaign rhetoric, without any factual basis at all. One final data point, and it's an important one. In 2022, Trump, still pushing his baseless voter fraud lie, posted this on Truth Social, Fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Can we agree terminating all rules, especially those in our precious founding document, requires irrefutable proof? All we have heard are constant complaints about fraud and a stolen election from Trump and characters like Mike Lindell, Carrie Lake, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, without a shred of evidence. That post exposed who Trump really is, a man who would terminate our Constitution and its brilliant system of checks and balances in the dangerous pursuit of unfettered presidential power. That's exactly what Project 2025 is about, so in this rare instance, we must believe what Trump has told us. If you're an undecided voter who's leaning Trump, perhaps you think our recounting of these facts makes us your enemy. It does not. We're not professional writers or part of the media or Democratic activists. We're just a normal Americans who want what's best for this country, for her future, and most of all for her everyday citizens. We don't have money. We don't have political influence. All we can offer is the truth of those who witnessed this history directly from their own eyes and ears. Shame on us all if we ignore their testimony. The bottom line is this: Donald Trump is the only president in the 235-year history of our republic who has refused to peacefully transfer the powers granted him by the people to his duly elected successor. This makes him wholly unfit to again assume the awesome powers of the presidency. It has been said that people get the government they deserve. That may not be true in every case, but if we put Trump back in power, it will certainly be true for us. The facts recounted here show that Trump is not a benign incompetent, but rather a dangerous manipulator with highly questionable intent and little allegiance to the truth. Madison and the other framers of the Constitution could never have imagined such a flawed individual being considered for the presidency, never mind having the people grant him its powers. Those who worked closely with Trump and now refuse to endorse him have grown to almost 50 of his inner circle. This includes his own vice president, other cabinet members, and his highest-ranking military advisors. With all the damning statements and sworn testimony exposing Trump's misdeeds, we must all rise up to defeat this threat to the republic. If we fail, the consequences will be ours to suffer. Knowing the desperate measures he took to stay in power after losing in 2020, how will another Trump presidency unfold? Will we find he ran just for revenge against those who opposed him? Or to escape accountability for the criminal charges he faces? Will he govern as an authoritarian, like his favorite world leaders, Orban, Xi, and Putin, who rule rather than represent? Will we see the end of free and fair elections? These are troubling questions. We hope they go forever unanswered. Our future, for better or worse, rests entirely in our own hands. May we choose wisely.